Is Stasis dead? Well, I think the brainless playstyle of just loading out whatever Stasis, running into Crucible, and profiting is over. Stasis is now requiring some build crafting. Now, that's not to say you couldn't build craft with Stasis in the previous sandbox, but the reality was, it didn't matter what you were using, Stasis was just powerful. The most powerful amongst all of our subclasses. What's interesting is like here recently, Bungie's sandbox team stated that essentially they actually designed Stasis to be more defensive. And that was like the original concept. You got a guy rushing you with a shotgun, you freeze him. You got super mobile characters like Top Tree Dawnblades, Jumpity Hunters, you slide them and freeze them. Unfortunately, that of course was not how Stasis shipped. Despite whatever defensive capabilities it was meant to have, it was times 10 in its offensive capabilities. Now, I do want to bring up the other day we did go over every single change. We did it before and we did it after. Essentially comparing the two sandboxes. It's a long video. It's 45 minutes. Somebody asked the other day, why do we do it before? For a lot of reasons, mainly for context, just to know, okay, how much of a change are we talking? Because you can read off patch notes all day, but until you actually get in there and start messing around with it, you don't really know how drastic of a change it actually was. Some things that were huge though, things like the general stasis changes, where you no longer break out of freeze. That's a huge one. Across the board, that's a wide blanket nerf to stasis. You only get frozen for 1.35 seconds, and your character automatically breaks out. Very little time there after getting a freeze to finish off your opponent. But if you're interested in a more comprehensive overview, go check out that video, guys. But I did mention that to me, stasis and its original brain dead, high reward, little to no risk playstyle is over. Like really, it's over. Now you gotta actually think a little. Now we're gonna start with the subclass that was hit the most, which is obviously Behemoth. A lot of things here, like a lot. Number one, Cryoclasm, requiring you to sprint for a small duration before you can activate it. Howl of the Storm also got a hit. Probably the biggest change was actually Shiver Strike. That flight speed is greatly reduced, like super slow. We even timed it the other day, but essentially a Guardian wearing like a movement exotic could match the speed of your Shiver Strike speed. This plays a role in the super because that's how you close the gap with this super. Super noticeable change. On top of that, Glacial Quake has like less vertical free space. And I would say one of the biggest changes is actually the damage resistance from 50% to 47%. I'm talking squishy, as in there will be many times you will pop your Behemoth super and get instantly melted by an assortment of weapons, whether it's a shotgun, whether it's DMT or even DMT with Vorpal. It doesn't really matter. They all can pretty much crap on you inside of your Behemoth super. And now that the Shiver Strike is slower in closing the gap, you really do have to play this strategically when you pop this super. And for most of my Crayon Eaters, well, we're not good at that, right? We know one direction, forward. So 9 times out of 10, it's a good chance you'll be killed. And that was the thing with Behemoth. Behemoth had a great super and simultaneously some of the best, if not the best neutral game. The movement, the Shiver Strike, Cryoclasm, being able to be utilized immediately without any type of buildup. I spent a lot of time with this subclass yesterday, and I do suggest anyone that's playing this subclass to lean more into the neutral game. I was still taking advantage of Hedrons. I know it doesn't give you a damage bonus, but all those other benefits are still really, really good. I was also taking advantage of Whisper of Chains and Cryoclasm together, which I know is kind of odd. I like Howl of the Storm though, because for those moments that I do mess up and I don't sprint for long enough to activate Cryoclasm, I can just activate Howl of the Storm. On top of that, we did go back to Glacial Nades, using things like Cryoclasm to break our own Glacial Nade. This, of course, can definitely secure the kill if you get the freeze on an enemy. But the other added benefits, like the Overshield with Whisper of Rhyme and the extra resist there, the tanking capabilities of Whisper of Chains, was extremely helpful. Again, lean more into the neutral game. That's kind of where Behemoth is really shining. And when you do pop the super, don't do what we've been doing now for like the past 6-7 months, where you light attack into a group of enemies, go for a slam, and destroy everything. That's just not gonna happen. Like occasionally, maybe. But for the most part, you're gonna have to be selective in how you approach your enemies. And I found a lot of times I would actually just like do my heavy attack first to get a freeze off on them before really pushing into the group of enemies. Because let me just tell you, the light attack, which does have some funky hit registration, is a tad bit worse now considering the Shiver Strike speed is so slow. Other than that, I think Behemoth is good. Will it be the class that I utilize when I play Titan? Perhaps. Like if I'm leaning, like I said, more into my neutral game, absolutely. But there's other classes that I feel like have just as good neutral game as well as superior supers, and that's things like Bottom Tree Striker, Bottom Tree Hammers. Really, I would say Behemoth is no longer the singular option amongst Titans. Now moving on to hunters. I know hunters also got nerfed. You got things like Withering Blade with its tracking capabilities being much less than what it was before. They also touched up on things like Touch of Winter, Winter Shroud. Here's the thing. Revenant in its neutral game department alongside a hunter's mobility, in my eyes, is still one of the best. Like, I get it. I know your shurikens got a nerf. You won't be able to throw them to the other side of the map, not looking at your enemies and still expected to tag the whole team. That doesn't happen anymore. But with a combination of Stompies and the wombo combination of Glacier Nades and Shatter Dive, in my eyes, I think Revenant is still very, very powerful in its neutral game. Like, when you start combining it with things like Whisper of Fissures, Whisper of Shards, I was even taking advantage of Whisper of Torment, which I hope procs inside of PvP, because if it wasn't, well, I was just wasting my time. Regardless, this is still such a great combination. And this is one of the few stasis abilities that can be used so well offensively as well as defensively. You got a guy rushing you, you're already jumping away from that shotgun user, throw your Glacial Nade down, Shatter Dive. It's the same thing we were doing months ago. The difference back then was, well, you could just do it blindfolded and still get a kill. Now you gotta kind of look at your target, kind of be close, but if you rock the right fragments, you'll either secure the kill or at least get the target weak enough to finish them off. Where Revenant is the weakest at, in my opinion, is the super. Now, direct hits are still good, but setting up this tornado that can just run around, track to all these different targets like it used to do, and this is not even in the last sandbox, it was like the previous sandbox, pre-nerf, you just don't have that from the Revenant super anymore. On top of that, visibly, you can see the actual tornado. So overall, it's easier to avoid. But what Bungie's trying to do here is they want to give us mainly a shutdown super with some slight roaming capabilities. And it's got that to some degree, although much less potent than what it was previously. And now that things like Icarus Dash can get out of slow and other abilities can scoot out of slow, even when that tornado does finally make its way to the enemy, if they have any type of ability that can move them, whether it's Shiver Strike or a lunge ability inside of a super, they can scoot out of that slow and keep themselves from dying. Regardless, despite the super not being the best, I still find that the neutral game completely makes up for it. Like, I like the neutral game of Titan, but I think the neutral game of Revenant is by far stronger. It plays to the strengths of a hunter, the verticality. This is still a loadout I would definitely use. And we're not even talking about other things like Backers. Backers is still great, and there will be a lot of people still playing hunter because of Backers. So of all the stasis subclasses, in my eyes, I think Revenant is still the most lethal. Now, I'm not saying it needs a nerf. I'm just saying its neutral game abilities is good. So use it. Why not? This is a fun playstyle. I love wombo comboing. And I feel like after the Glacial Nades themselves got nerfed, amongst other abilities that got dealt with in the last sandbox, people immediately just ran to Cold Snap. But now that Cold Snap has been greatly nerfed, and you've had Dust Fields get nerfed, you've had Cold Snaps get nerfed, you had Glacial Nades get dealt with. In my opinion, out of all the grenades now, Glacial Nade is still the best. So lean into that, hunters. Play with that. Spec out for high discipline. Spec out your fragments for that. And I know the aspect Touch of Winter got a nerf, but again, that was targeting Cold Snap. It didn't say anything there about Glacial Nades. So in my opinion, I think Revenant hunters are still very much a strong option if you can live without having a strong super. However, other subclasses are definitely back on the menu. Spectral Blades, 100% back on the menu. Has great neutral game, has a great super. However, the difference here, I feel like is weighted more towards Revenant. Like I said a second ago, that the Titan and its Behemoth subclass has neutral game on par with things like Bottom Tree Striker, Bottom Tree Hammers. In my eyes, I think the Hunter Revenant still has the best neutral game amongst hunters. Granted, it's offset by its super, which is normally how it should be, right? But overall, I was still very much impressed with this. So much so that I may even play Hunter a little more after these changes. Just saying, not a Hunter main, but this felt good. Some would even say cheesy, but I don't know, man. It's hard taking a definitive stance on stasis when new fragments and aspects are going to be coming out here in a few months, right? So it's like where we sit today can completely flip with the inclusion of those new fragments and aspects down the road. Regardless though, just pointing out where we sit now, Hunter Revenant and its neutral game abilities, despite shurikens getting slapped in the face, still feel great. Which takes us to Shadebinder. Now, Shadebinder had a number of things that affected it. Number one, its freezing projectile strength will ramp down after 2 seconds of flight, which, let's be real, we tested this. This is not really that big of a deal. The reason why it's not that big of a deal, we're talking like 50 plus meters of tracking in that 2-second time frame. Okay, you're not going to be trying to freeze someone 50 plus meters away. Like, you may, but you still got to get close enough to do your shatter attack. Where I think Warlocks got affected the most, though, is Penumbral Blast. It's melee, where its proximity detonation was reduced, as well as its tracking. Also, its overall environmental impact and its freeze radius was lowered down almost by half, from 2.7 meters to 1.5. This is significant. Can you still get freezes off our enemies? Yes. Could you do it mindlessly? No. The strengths here with Shadebinder, in my opinion, because we don't have things like the Hunter Jump to take advantage of Glacial Nades, because Cold Snap also just got a hell of a nerf, and because Dustfield is pretty much garbage inside of PvP. The overall neutral game for Shadebinder, I wouldn't say it's garbage, but I put it to you like this. The Bleak Watcher Stasis turret is like my go-to option. And let me just say, that's a great turret for PvE, but for PvP, it's not really people's go-to option. It's my go-to option now, though, because of, well, there's not really much else there. I would say the biggest strength to Shadebinder is in its super. The Shadebinder super itself is still one of the best supers. It can easily go head-to-head against all of the supers in the game. We've done crazy shenanigans, even the other day, like freezing Coated the Missile Titans coming at us mid-air and then killing them. This is a great super. And I would actually suggest anyone that is playing with Shadebinder to spec into your super as much as you can. So much so that you may even want to do stupid stuff like rock Glacial Inheritance inside of PvP. Yes, it works inside of PvP. I did kind of take another approach, though, and was really taking advantage of like high discipline and did this thing where I was like doing zone control. I would just drop down stasis turrets and literally just sit there and wait for people to step out and get hit by my Bleak Watcher. And like really overcommitting here with things like Whisper of Durance. I know somebody's gonna be like, yo, it's Durance. I don't care. I done looked at Durance long enough. But that combination with the stasis turret in a game mode like Control is extremely annoying and very team oriented. You know where the enemy's coming from because the turret immediately looks at them and starts shooting, even if it doesn't make contact. But if it does, it starts to slow them, which I know slow got a nerf in this sandbox, but it's still very annoying. Overall, though, I find that the super for Shadebinder is his strong point. However, other subclasses on the Warlock is just so good. I mean, you've got Top Tree Dawnblade, which has the best mobility in the game. You've got Chaos Reach, which can still very much wall bang people, and when combined with Geomax, you can get your super back extremely fast, and of course, keep your super. And I know a lot of people are like, yo, Chaos Reach doesn't kill you through walls, it's just splash damage. No, we've tested this out on multiple maps. It will blast you through a wall. So it's very much still just as busted as it was pre-nerf, which in my opinion, I don't think the nerf ever really went out. Chaos Reach doesn't feel any different. Regardless, that's kind of what's happening there. And I'm seeing a lot of Warlocks drop Shadebinder and go straight into Dawnblade as well as Chaos Reach. And look, here's the thing. A lot of your Warlocks weren't even rocking Shadebinder to begin with. Now you just have whatever was left rocking Shadebinder, now rocking those other subclasses. Great super, but you can still get a very good super from Top Tree Dawn, Chaos Reach, and of course have the neutral game abilities of Top Tree Dawn. Look, I'm not pointing out these subclasses for a nerf. I'm just simply pointing out the competition that Shadebinder is faced with. I think like overcommitting to this zone control, this lockdown, this slowing everything that steps out in front of you may actually be the route to go with on Warlock in combination with whatever you can do to feed into your super. And that's just high intellect. Overall, I just don't see myself going to Shadebinder, despite it having a very good super, like a great dueling super. Like I can definitely still see myself giving Behemoth a go with the right builds, giving Revenant a go with its neutral game abilities. Those classes pretty much sit level with the best subclasses on their class. Shadebinder, man, it's tough. Which like Bungie even stated, they were like, yo, not many people are using Shadebinder. Word for word here. They even stated that while Shadebinder may not be the most powerful in competitive play, being frozen by its abilities takes a large emotional toll on the victim. The main thing is, I think Bungie was like, all right, we've got all these stasis nerfs going out. We have to touch Shadebinder. And so they did. This is one of those classes though that I don't know if a fragment or an aspect would really bail it out. Really what's gonna bail out Shadebinder for me would have to be an exotic combination, like something there to really tie into that subclass. So guys, those are my thoughts. Everything in regards to stasis, how I feel about them, where they sit. Again, if you're interested in a more comprehensive overview of all the stasis changes from the previous sandbox to now, feel free to check out our stasis video. Again, like I said earlier, I think the overall playstyle for stasis has changed. I think the brain dead strategy for stasis is dead. You'll no longer be rewarded just simply for having a stasis subclass and just running out into the open and getting kills. You got to think about it. You got to build craft. You have to spec certain ways. You have to spec into the strengths of the subclass themselves, whether it's the super or the neutral game, or maybe a combination of both. Regardless, in my opinion, this is how it should be. Every class is supposed to have an upside and a downside. side. Some have an amazing super, but weak neutral game, and vice versa. Again though, this video right here can completely change a few months from now with the inclusion of whatever new fragments and aspects down the road. So whenever you're watching this video, you might want to just check the dates. Fellas and ladies, thank you all for coming and watching, and as always,
Slap that like button like your mama told you right.